There's a lot going on in this movie.
It was like I was watching it for the first time.
I like this movie.
It has a special place in my heart.
Very close to my heart.
This was a good one.
I want to like this movie.
What? Seriously?
I loved it.
Very flat, kind of boring.
This movie blows me away. This movie turns me on.
Terrible. It is terrible. All these keys everywhere. Influences, baby.
Huge, huge fan.
That's it in a nutshell.
Yeah, they're dead. They're all messed up.
Hello, 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 out there in YouTube and podcast land. You have reached Johnny Has the Keys, where we talk about horror movies and science fiction films and those key elements that lift and separate them from the average genre fare. Are you new to us? Well, we would like to welcome you. David and I have been friends for eons and eons. Actually, you can date that personal photo behind me. And we have talked about movies since the turn of last century, and we are obsessed with them. And that's why we talk about horror and science fiction movies on a weekly basis. We've been doing this for 6 seasons now. We are in our 7th season. And those of you coming back already know this, and that's why you're here. I am here with my good friend and co-host, David Horton. David, how are you doing today?
I am doing pretty well. I'm doing good. I'm a little red from working out in the yard and stuff. So don't adjust the color on your YouTube channel if you're looking at us or whatever. And I'm in a very, not conflicted at all, just a very two-sided feeling. I finished watching what I call Star Trek Disco. A lot of us call it that, but other people call it Star Trek Discovery. They just finished the series. So I think I mentioned that I'd started the last season a couple of weeks ago or whatever, but finally watched all of
the final
season of Star Trek Discovery.
One last adventure.
And I don't think you've watched any of those, have you? Have you seen any of Disco? Disco stars, who is it, Shaniqua, the girl from Walking Dead.
Yeah, Sasha is who I know her as from The Walking Dead. Yeah. I can't remember her real name.
And it was, of course, originally created by 2 creators, and then they immediately left over creative differences with Paramount. Brian Fuller was brought in. He had some great ideas and did some stuff. Then he left, and it was left in the guardianship of Alex Kurtzman, who I've gone on record several times as saying should not be the head of Trek, but he is. And this season shows it. All these people online are saying how sad it was, or they cried, or blah, blah, blah. And there was not tier 1 from me. It was a terrible, terrible, terrible series finale. It was badly written. It was badly acted. It was not well done at all. And I was going, you had one job. This was your finale. This was your goodbye to these characters. Found out later that possibly the first thing was it's also almost 90 minutes long. Normally they're like in the 50 to 58 range.
But it's a season, right? You watched the whole season.
I watched the whole season, but the whole season, just the last episode is 90 minutes long.
Okay.
And found out in doing some research for this podcast that the reason for it was when they shot it, they didn't know it was going to be the last season. It's like they shot it and finished that season out, and then Paramount said, and that's it, you're done. We're not renewing you. So they went back in and shot like 30 minutes of footage, which was what they call the coda, which is the ending of the series. And I was going, you had time to come up with something to tie up your series, and this is what you came up with. And it was just, there's parts of it that are so fan pandering I couldn't take it. There's other parts of it that are just, there's no depth to it. I was already pissed off this season because this whole season, again, is a season-long single story.
So you've been pissed off about this show in its entirety.
Yeah, but because it's always the same. It's always in the first episode, we show you the MacGuffin, whatever's going to hold together the whole 8, 10, 15, 12, however many episodes we decide to do this season. And each one's going to be this little piece of the puzzle to go further. This one literally was. They are shown something in the first season and they're given a piece of an intergalactic puzzle. And they have to find the other 5 pieces to put it together to take them to the ultimate MacGuffin thing, which does nothing, by the way. By the end of it, they don't even use it. They just get rid of it. It doesn't matter.
And each episode's about a different character.
No. Well, they tend to focus on a single there's a predominant character, but no one more than Burnham. She is the Mary Sue, God Almighty, can do everything on every away mission, saving the galaxy repeatedly, doing it, and in between crying and being very emotional. And
it's a hard job, David.
Obviously, it must be a really difficult job. But
she's a Starfleet captain.
It just did not work at all. And I feel sad that I'll miss like Saru because I really like his character and I really like that. It's probably one of the best crafted aliens in Star Trek history, really. But what they did to his storyline was horrible and to everybody else in it. It's not one. I couldn't name you the bridge crew because they got rid of them this season because they couldn't shoot with some of them. So they put in brand new characters. Yeah, just use AI. Yeah, no.
All I have to hear is you say something about these things, and then I don't have to watch them because I really liked my little venture into the first season of Strange New Worlds, and I couldn't finish the second season. So
I told you it's because of Kurtzman. I mean, he just doesn't know what Star Trek is.
Yeah,
he does not know, and the first one was a nice little homage and had some stuff. The second season, oh my gosh, was so bad and just got worse. Not as bad as Disco. Disco's really horrible. And now they've just announced Starfleet Academy, which is going to be a brand new series. Holly Hunter has just signed to be the star of the series.
And it's going to be a bunch of kids.
Yep.
Yeah. No,
because that's what works now is, I guess.
No, I think they need to stop that. Because I tried to watch Echo and I could only get 2 episodes in and I was like, I'm done. And that's like the young Marvel, one of the young Marvel people. And I'm like, no, I'm not in.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, well, so anyway, I did not have a great week doing my genre week because I tried to finish Disco. And thank God Disco is dead in every respect, musically and Star Trek wise. So there you go.
Well,
what did you do, Tim? Did you do anything fun?
I actually did something a lot of fun. It's not necessarily just horror genre. It is actually more strongly in the Western genre. And I watched a little movie called Bone Tomahawk.
Ooh, no, that's horror. From what I've heard, that's horror.
It's got, well, when the horror comes in, you believe it's a horror movie. But it's a terrible title, Bone Tomahawk. I was like, I really don't know what else I would call it. But Bone Tomahawk just does not sound like a great title to me. You know how I am about that.
Yeah.
It's a Western horror hybrid, but in a true sense, mostly Western. But like I said, when the horror comes in, it is brutal. It's directed by S. Craig Zoller, who I went into a rabbit hole over. He has done other films called Dragged Across Concrete and Brawl in Cell Block 99. But aside from this, he is a novelist. He writes books. And Kurt Russell was actually reading him, I think, before he was even in this movie, because Kurt says he writes realistic Westerns.
Okay.
So I have since bought one of his books. I haven't read it yet, but I'm curious because if they're as dark as this, I'm very curious to see how they read. The cast, of course, is fantastic. Aside from Kurt Russell, it also stars Matthew Fox, who we know from Lost, Patrick Wilson, who, God, first time I saw him was in like Angels in America, I think. And Richard Jenkins, the guy that was the father on 6 Feet Under. Very, very recognizable character actor. And he has one of the best parts in this, by the way. Synopsis: it's in the Old West. Sheriff Kurt Russell and his deputy Richard Jenkins and a gunslinger Matthew Fox and a cowboy Patrick Wilson embark on a mission to rescue three people from a savage group of cave dwellers. So it is an Indian tribe or a Native American tribe, but even the Native Americans that are like friends with the townsfolk fear this Native American offshoot of people that live in these caves. So they're legendary, basically.
For their bone tomahawks.
Yeah. It gets 91% on Rotten Tomatoes with 103 reviews. And I say it's a completely fair rating, even though it wasn't horror all the way through. I was totally into it the entire time. And I've actually added it to our list. So of movies that we could potentially cover. So that's what I did in my genre week.
Maybe they should call it like Prairie Descent, since it's cave dwellers sort of thing.
Black.
Just black.
Dark.
That's the name of the, none more black. It's the blackest it could be.
Blood on the saddle. Blood on the saddle. Isn't that the Country Bear Jamboree? I think it is.
Let's
Blood.
see.
All right, I know. Your segue is this is not a traditional sci-fi movie, and I did something that was not a traditional horror movie.
Right. So we are not doing a traditional science fiction. We are actually doing a fantasy. We're doing a double feature fantasy today over the same or over a similar topics. We probably, I guess, should take them one at a time. You think? Maybe,
but I mean, you can say what they both are. That's fine.
So we are doing John Boorman's Excalibur, which I think we'll probably talk about a little bit more than the other one. It was 1981, directed, co-written, produced by Boorman, and has quite a good following. But we're also covering The Green Knight, which came out fairly recently, 2021, written, produced, directed, and edited by David Lowery, who I had not heard of before, so I did some research on him. It was very interesting.
I'm curious
when we get there with him. But Excalibur. So Excalibur is basically taking the tales of King Arthur and specifically certain books that we'll get into when we get into production and all of that, but basically telling the story of the rise of Arthur from his birth, actually prior to his birth, his father, Uther. We follow him and his initial reign, and then Arthur coming of age, getting the sword and the stone, wielding Excalibur, uniting the land, forming the Round Table, having all of his knights there, then Lancelot coming in and mucking that all up, and Mordred even making it worse, and then we end with the traditional Arthur is taken away by the ladies to Avalon, where one day the king will return. So it's a very solid Arthurian mythology legend story.
You don't see many of those.
Well, I don't think you see many on film, and especially not locally. If in doing research for this, tons of documentaries and made for BBC movies and stuff like that in England. They still love Arthur, which is fine. It's a great myth and very, I think, very timeless. So it's fine to redo it and keep redoing it and all of that. But I know for a fact you've seen this movie before. But
yeah.
What did you
it's
think?
been a long time since I had seen it. I probably had not seen it since it was on video in the 80s. And I watched like an HD copy I rented, and it was just as good as I remembered it. I love this movie, but I love the book that it's based on too, because I had to study that basically in college, and it's L'Amour d'Arthur by Thomas Malory. They do take liberties. Both films actually take liberties, but I don't have a problem with that because there's liberties taken with this material all over the place. I mean, there's so many different versions of King Arthur or Morgana, which is Morgan Le Fay in the Mallory book. They change things, but usually it's not bad. I mean, nothing that I disagree with. Did you?
No, no, not at all. Morgause, Morgan Le Fay,
Mhm.
Gawain, Percival, Galahad, Lance, there's so
Yeah.
much. This legend has been retold and retold and told in song, told in poetry, told in ballad. So,
Right. Like,
yeah,
for instance, Percival in this is more of a Galahad type character because Galahad is
correct,
not in this. Right. And
correct.
I don't have a
Yeah.
problem with that.
Yeah, production wise, the originally Boorman was contracted to do Lord of the Rings. He was going to do a version of Lord of the Rings and hopefully the first of a 3-movie series. Again, this was back in the late 70s.
Right. It would have to be. I
But
mean, it's so much
through all
material.
of through all of the wrangling and everything else that went on and studio shakeups and all that, he ended up losing it. And the owner of that time of the rights and everything ended up giving it to Ralph Bakshi, who did the animated Lord of the Rings that we all
Hmm.
saw in like 79. I think. And Boorman then just immediately began working on this new project, which was the story of King Arthur. And he based it on, like you said, Mallory's The Death of Arthur or Le Morte d'Arthur, James Frazer's The Golden Bough, and another novel called From Ritual to Romance. So those
Okay.
are the 3 basic structures he was using. He and the other, because he co-wrote it with, and I don't have it in my notes.
Rospo
Shoot,
Pallenberg.
Rospo Pallenberg.
He wrote the screenplay.
And they wrote it together over about a 6-month period. It cost $11 million. It was all filmed in Ireland. I've got some production notes that are pretty cool. It was basically shot, all the exteriors were shot in Ireland or at Ardmore Studios, which was an Irish studio there in Ireland. The issue was that Boorman had so many exteriors in it, and it's Ireland, which means it rains a
A
lot.
lot.
So they would have to wait for like hours for like a half-hour window to shoot something, and that's all the footage they got all day. And they would have to do it again tomorrow and do it again the next day. And so it was just very tedious filming, according to all the production notes I've seen.
From what I understand, a lot of it was practically in his backyard, too,
Yes, yeah, he does live there. So there's a lot of that.
which is kind of cool.
And also, a real cool trivia I found is that he hated fight choreography. He hated all of it. And this movie has quite a lot of knights on horseback and battles and everything else. So he basically said it was too tedious. It's too hard to shoot. I like having 4 cameras set up. So you guys so a lot of the actors were improvising all of their fights. They were just making them up on the scene. Yeah.
Sounds like
And
somebody I know.
that was actually a good thing because he cast mostly theater people in this. And for a lot of them, it was the first movie they've ever done.
Yeah, there are a lot of famous faces in this. This is like the Fast Times at Ridgemont High of the fantasy world. Everybody in this movie went on to become famous, pretty much.
Yep. He specifically sought out stage actors for the casting. A lot of that had to deal with the fact that he wanted a mythical or an otherworldly feel to it. So he didn't want trained film actors or actresses. So we'll get to that when we get to that. He set it in the Dark Ages, even though plate mail wouldn't exist for about 300 more years. He asked Terry English, Terry English was also an advisor on Lord of the Rings when it was actually finally filmed
Jackson.
by Jackson. Yeah. But Terry English is a very, very well-known English armorer, and he was asked to basically build 14 suits of armor. That was his original contract, his original story. By the end of it, he had built over 200,
Wow.
And it took him almost 3.5 months to build them all.
And were they really? Surely he used something that was lighter weight, or did they really have to wear like heavy metal?
Yeah,
wow,
they really
that's crazy.
And that's another reason why the cast was miserable. It was raining, it was cold, the armor was uncomfortable, and they didn't even have choreographers there. They had to make up their own fights, so.
I'll just fall off my horse onto you.
Yeah, I'll just fall off. I'm dead. Because he had to design all of Uther's armor, and that whole era of.
It was a different era, yeah.
We're talking about at least 15, 20 years later.
It was less shiny.
Yeah, much less shiny. Which is also, if you go online and look up production of of Excalibur, you see a lot of other production stuff too, like the struggles of lighting it and doing it the way he wanted. He wanted green everywhere, so they used a lot.
Especially in a scene with Excalibur, whenever that sword's in frame, there's green lights. You see them.
Correct. He wanted
Yeah.
he wanted Excalibur to always glow green without it being an optical. So it had to be a practical light on set with a filter on it or a gel on it, or use green filters on the camera to give the whole scene a greenish hue. Not that it looks green like the Grinch, but like the shot you have behind you. The camera has a green filter on, so
And
that the greens are
sometimes you
played
see it reflected in like the armor, the green light.
Correct.
Yeah.
It was horrible to light when they went to the polished armor for Arthur and the knights. John Boorman actually owns Excalibur. It's actually in his possession and at his house.
Is he still
along
alive?
with the Holy Grail. Oh, well, his estate has it now.
Okay, I was going to say, I didn't think he was.
But he still has it. It's still there. It hasn't been auctioned off.
A lot of folks in this movie are dead, actually, now that I think about
Sadly,
it.
that is very true. Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you want to talk about casting or do you have production stuff or anything like that?
Well, I didn't know if you wanted to talk about any scenes first.
Like all of them. I
Yeah.
mean, come on.
Yeah.
You go
Anything with Merlin is great.
Yeah, Nicole Williamson is awesome.
And I love all the stuff with Excalibur and the hand in the water and how the Lady of the Lake can be in any water, whether it's a puddle or whether it's a river or whether it's a lake. But yeah, I mean, I can talk cast. I mean, there's definitely a lot to cover in cast.
We could talk scenes before that. I mean, if you want to. You're right. I mean, my first two are Lady of the Lake in every scene she's in, and the quote for it is the doom of men that they forget, which is a Merlin quote about Arthur. But yes, anything with Lancelot's battle with Arthur, I think is a very well done and well filmed battle scene. You know, where he beats Lancelot and breaks Excalibur, and Lady of the Lake gives it back to him essentially.
You're talking about when they first meet. Yes. I thought you were talking about Lancelot's battle with Gawain. Is it Gawain that he fights?
No, Mordred.
No, Liam Neeson
you're talking about
challenges
the joust.
Lancelot.
The joust. Yeah.
The joust. Yeah.
That's a
very
good scene
realistic too.
Lancelot stabbed is an effect that I still don't know how they did, and I can't find research for how they did it. I have never figured it out since 1981 when I watched this movie in a theater like 3 times. I've never figured out how they did the effect of Lancelot with the sword in his side, and you see the other side of it and the front of it and everything, and he pulls it out and you see it come out, and it's not computer, it's live. How they do it, I have no idea. Some magic was used. The charm of making was used. Yeah. Charm of making. The charm of making, I've used that for decades. I still remember it. I know it. It's perfect. I love it. When Helen Mirren says it, it's awesome. When Nicole Williams says it, it's awesome.
I was going to say, any scene with Helen Mirren's great too, as Morgana. The music, we need neglect that. I know how much you love this movie because when I lived with you, you had the poster on the wall, and you used to use the soundtrack in tons of stuff that we did, whether it be a play or a short film.
Always.
So,
loved it. And interesting about the music, there's a trivia about that because the composer, who was the composer?
I don't have that.
Trevor Jones. He went on to do Dark Crystal the very next year with Jim Henson, but he had never really done soundtracks before. He'd done a couple of little shorts for film pieces, but had never scored a film before. And when he came in to start composing and saw the rough cut, Boorman had all of these directors put temp tracks in when they're editing something of just a song that I want a song like this. They'll do that a lot, right? Well, Boorman had all these songs in there and went, no, I want that song. I want Carmen de Barona right here in this part. And then I want Tristan and Isolde to be played during this love scene right here. So Trevor Jones was like going, so I had to write music around the music he had already selected, but still be period sounding enough, but still get the emotion that he wants. And I love the pieces he did. All that, all the spooky stuff is great. The theme is great, which is his theme. So yeah, I love the music in it. I've also got anything on Merlin's entrance, especially. Carmen of Verona when they all ride out. The whole last scene between Uther and Guinevere is very much reminds me. I mean, the big key to that to me is Camelot, because the big scene at the end of
You mean
Camelot.
Arthur and Guinevere?
Yeah, Arthur. Did I say Uther? Sorry.
You
Arthur.
said Uther, yeah.
Yeah, Arthur. Excalibur's entrance. I mean, there's so many that are just so iconic in this movie. I said for decades that if I ever got married, I wanted that wedding. I wanted outside, everybody in armor, everybody in these gorgeous gowns, all this stuff. It'd be awesome. Let's do that.
I'm going to send a present.
No.
I'm not going to be there.
Okay. But yeah, it was just I love this movie. I think
really, there hasn't been, like I said, there's not been a lot of movies about King Arthur, and I can't think of a better one for sure.
No. Nope.
So this is like the penultimate. And the whole time I was watching it, I was like, why hasn't somebody done this again? Because it's an age-old story. It's not necessarily remaking this movie, but it could easily be done again. Somebody like Guillermo or Peter Jackson or whoever. Why haven't they tackled this?
Interesting that they haven't, because it is, as far as medieval mythos goes, it's probably the best one.
Right.
Until Tolkien came along and created his own. So, yeah, curious why nobody's even done a Netflix series. I mean, they did that terrible series that was on for like 6 or 7 seasons called Merlin.
I do remember that, but I never watched it. Yeah, you're right. I forgot about that.
Oh, my daughter loved it, and she made me watch it, and I went, no. Because Merlin is not a little boy. He is not a little boy. Stupid. No. So anyway.
Okay. Well, we can move on to cast if you want.
Oh, speaking of little boys. No. Okay, go ahead. Yeah.
Nigel Terry played King Arthur. He unfortunately died in 2015. He played John in The Lion and Winter. I did not really know other things. I mean, sometimes when you get British actors or British stage actors in particular, you don't know them from other things. So I put down Lion and Winter just because I knew of that movie. There was other people attached to it originally. One of them was Sean Connery. Did you know that?
No, but I can't.
Well, you got to remember, he would have been younger then, so it may have worked.
Yeah, but he'd have to play a teenager, and Sean, I can't ever picture as a teenager.
Not really, no.
I mean, Nigel struggles. It's not the best. Young Arthur is not the best teenager you've ever seen.
No, not at all. They dress him down a bit and pull his hair back to make him look younger in that shot behind me. But yeah, he was older too, and I can understand why they would want Sean Connery, but it would have been like you said, I think a miscasting.
Well, he got his chance to do it in First Night, so there you go.
True. Helen Mirren played Morgana. I'm doing these in the order, I guess, of their being famous. I don't know how this is listed. We know her, of course, from The Queen and Gosford Park and about 149 other things that she's been in. John Boorman cast her opposite Nicole Williamson as Merlin. I guess you would say Merlin is Morgana's mentor in this. But they both protested, but he casted them anyway because he felt their dislike for each other made them perfect as rivals.
Do you know why they disliked each other?
Because, yes, they had done a production of Macbeth that was notoriously bad or something. And they never got over it or their hatred for each other, I guess, and ended up both getting cast in this movie opposite each other.
Yeah, from what I read online, the detailed reason was the fact that Helen Mirren was superstitious about it, and Nicole Williamson refused to be and did not respect the theater tradition of the Scottish play, and the play was a horrible flop, and she blamed him. And he was going, oh, so you're blaming the gremlins. You're blaming the gremlins for it. And she goes, oh, it's either the gremlins or it's you.
I did not realize that was the reason. I knew that it was a plagued production, but I did not know it was because he was like using the Scottish play word on stage.
Yep.
For those of
So-
y'all that do not know what we're talking about, you are never supposed to mention the word Macbeth in a theater. It is sort of a curse. And the only time that you can do it is when you're actually putting the production on, though, isn't it?
Yes, and even then, you are tempting fate. And every version that you ever hear about the Scottish play has issues. There
Yeah.
are accidents and things. So,
Mm.
so
I
yeah,
did-
but she's great.
She's great, and I
amazing.
did read that her and Williamson wound up becoming very good friends during filming, so they made up. they didn't hate each other forever,
And she became better friends with Boorman. I think they dated for a while.
did they? Okay.
Huh? Mhm.
Yeah, she was very pretty. Nicholas Clay played Lancelot. He died young too. I cannot
Yes.
remember when, but someone else auditioned for this role, and he's American. Do you know who that is?
No.
Michael Beck. He was very popular at the time.
At that time, he was.
We know him from Warriors, and he was also
but-
the lead in Xanadu with Olivia Newton-John.
I guess he could.
It depends on his accent, because he would need a British accent. So,
Yeah.
Sherry Lungi, if I'm pronouncing that right.
Yes.
It was her theatrical movie debut as Guinevere in that picture behind me. Paul Jeffrey played Percival. And then that brings
Very
us,
good.
that brings us to Nicole Williamson. Max von Sydow was originally cast as Merlin. Did you know that?
I had heard that. Yes. Yeah.
I wonder what happened, because I don't have any notes about it.
I don't know
Why he
I don't have
dropped
any
out.
either. As far as why the drop, it may have been contractual or something. Because he would have been good. I could definitely see him in the role. I
Oh,
think
for
Nicole
sure.
Williamson. What I've always thought about his performance was he intentionally changed inflection. And looking into it, researching it for this, found out that part of that was him and Boorman discussing it and the feeling that Merlin was otherworldly. He didn't need to seem normal. So that's why he would smile at things that weren't funny, or he would be frowning about something else, or he would use those weird inflections that he's
He's
and
my
Boorman
favorite
liked
thing in
that.
this movie.
Oh
He's
yeah.
phenomenal in this movie. And I don't know that I've ever seen him in anything else that I can think of.
He played Sherlock Holmes in 7% Solution. He was very good in that too. That's
Yeah,
a good
no.
movie if you haven't seen it.
Mm-mm. Back to where I put this note. Many actors had been mentioned for the part of Merlin, including, like I said, Max von Sydow. Oddest of all, though, and you're going to love this.
What?
Another American, Lee Marvin.
For Merlin?
Yeah.
Hell no. I mean, what? Sorry.
Okay. Well, yeah.
What were you thinking about that one?
Did you know who John Boorman wanted to play the part, but had a conflict and couldn't do it? And he's an American too.
No. Who?
Donald Sutherland. We just talked about how good he was last week.
Yep. Yep.
In Mr. Harrigan's Phone. And I could see Donald Sutherland doing it.
Easily. And I could see him also doing the same Nicole Williamson thing where he changes his inflection.
Quirky.
Makes him quirky. Yeah.
Yeah, I could see
Yeah,
that as well.
I think that would work really well.
Yeah. What else did I have? John Osborne, who used to host on Turner Classic Movies, he's no longer with us, called Nicole Williamson the greatest actor since Marlon Brando.
I know he went on to do a bunch of theater. So,
well, and as you said, a lot of these guys have a theater background.
Mm-hmm.
United Artists, who produced the film, told Sir John Boorman he could cast anyone as Merlin he wanted except for Nicole Williamson. He has a reputation for not being easy.
No.
I mean, if the studio and Helen Mirren didn't want him to do it.
He's done a lot of adaptations too. Like I remember he did of Mice and Men at one
Okay.
point. He did a version of that. He did a version of like
Was he Lenny?
Yeah.
Okay.
He was Lenny. And I remember there was one other I keep trying to think. Oh, Robin and Marian, which ironically I should have been a key for this. That's a Robin Hood medieval setting, but
Mhm.
more traditional storytelling. He played Little John in that. So yeah.
He's small though, isn't he?
Nicole,
Maybe
yeah,
maybe he
yeah.
didn't play Lenny. Maybe he played the other one. I don't know.
I'm pretty sure he played Lenny, but
Interesting.
don't know. Yeah, I know he's done theater.
And then I mentioned he disliked actress Helen Mirren. That production of Macbeth was a Royal Shakespeare production.
Mhm.
So it was actually in Stratford. So that was the big deal.
A lot of the knights and the supporting girls came from Royal Shakespeare. So did like
Okay.
Patrick Stewart and everyone else. They came from Royal
Right.
Shakespeare.
And then, speaking of which, first of all, Gabriel Byrne is in this movie. It is his theatrical debut. I barely recognized him. He's so young. He plays Uther. I'm serious. I was like, who is that? He played Uther Pendragon. Of course, our podcast, we know him from movies like Hereditary, where he played the father. But he's also known as well in cinema for being in the Usual Suspects. Can't say it. Keith Buckley played Urians.
Urians.
Katrine Boorman played Igraine, and that is John's daughter. And I had a quote that someone said, I guess that Boorman said, once you've been raped by Gabriel Byrne she said, once you've been raped by Gabriel Byrne and Corn Redgrave in armor, watched by your father, you never look back.
Nope. Yep.
That's interesting. And then Corn Redgrave, obviously, we just mentioned him, played Cornwall. He is the son of Michael and the brother of Lynn and Vanessa and the uncle of Natasha. Those Redgraves, a very famous acting family from England. They're kind of like the Barrymores of England, wouldn't you say?
Very true.
Yeah. And then Niall O'Brien played Kay, Patrick Stewart, Jean-Luc Picard himself, and Professor Xavier played Leon de Grance. And I don't remember that character from the book. But
he's an extension of Lot. Because Lot in the book is Arthur's knight. He's his guardian. He takes him in.
Because Lancelot was really his right hand.
Yeah, but King Lot I'm talking about with young Arthur, before the sword and everything.
Okay, gotcha.
Lot and Ector are the two knights
like a mentor.
Essentially teach and mentor Arthur, young Arthur, who's a squire. But I assume when they were writing the script, he needed somebody to defend Arthur who wasn't his protector, his guardian, his uncle, or whatever. So he created Leodegrance, or took the knight Leodegrance and made him the Patrick Stewart character, who is really the first person who believes in Arthur so much that he creates a civil war. And it's not until he knights Uriens that he lets Uriens knight him that he starts unifying the knights. So it's a really cool dynamic in the movie, and Stewart's really good. He also becomes the father. He's the father of Guinevere. So
correct.
That kind of ties it
that's
into
what I knew him from in this, being her father. Sorry, I had to go to IMDb.
Well, he's the one that has the great Patrick Stewart line reading of, "If a boy is chosen, a boy shall be king."
Yeah,
you know?
Yeah, it's a very, very Picard thing.
Yeah.
It's funny.
Yeah.
Long before. Well, not long before. I mean, Next Generation was what, 87?
Yeah.
So it would have been
about
5
years from
this.
now.
Yeah.
He's going to become pretty big.
Yeah.
And then went on to be Dr. Xavier and everything else. So.
Right. And then I have back to casting Ciaran Hinds. Am I saying that right? Ciaran? Played Lot. This is his theatrical movie debut as well. I'm not, I mean, he's got a familiar face. I don't know. I couldn't name what he's been in. But
I'm not sure if it's Ciaran or Karen. It may be Karen.
It may be Karen because I may be saying it wrong. It's Ciaran, and there's a hyphen over, not a hyphen, an accent mark over the second A.
And he's done a lot of British and a lot of stuff, but he usually plays like the villain, the bad guy, the head of the mafia or the whatever. He's unrecognizable in Harry Potter because he plays Aberforth.
Okay, that's where you know him from. Okay, got it.
But But like he's in Munich, I know, and he's in a bunch of, and he always plays the bad guy. He's always like the villain
He's got a dark
guy.
look to him, for sure.
Yeah.
Pierce Brosnan auditioned for that role, but did not get
Oh, I
it.
could see that. Yeah.
And then I, for some reason, didn't have this in my notes, but there is another familiar face in there, and it is Liam Neeson plays Gawain or Gawain, however you want to say it. And that he's super young in this as well. And of course, he married Natasha Richardson, who died tragically in a skiing accident a few years back.
Yes.
So that's all I have for cast. As far as awards, this movie was nominated for an Academy Award for Best Cinematography. And it lost to Reds, the Warren Beatty movie. I did look that up. I don't understand that, but
I don't either, because this movie looks incredible.
I just remember Reds being like Yentl. It was like everything is about Warren Beatty in Reds, and everything about Yentl is about Barbra Streisand. I just remember them being personal projects.
Yeah, I could see that. They were, yeah.
The Academy of Science Fiction, Fantasy, and Horror nominated it for Best Fantasy Film. It lost to Raiders of the Lost Ark. Supporting actor Williamson, supporting actress Mirren, and director and makeup, but it won only for costumes.
See, I think this should have won an Oscar for audio or audio editing, just because, and I knew this from years and years ago when I read it in a magazine, so like Sim Fantastique or something sometime, but almost this entire movie is dubbed, because they were filming outside in the rain, everything else, and they just couldn't record. The audio recordings were terrible. So they had to redub them all. Battle scenes, dialogue, everything had to be re-edited. And it works. It looks really good. There's only a few times where you go, that didn't really match, did it?
I didn't know it was that extensive, but I read that one of the actresses in particular, every one of her lines was dubbed. It was like Guinevere, maybe. I can't remember.
It was young Morgan. It was the Boorman's daughter.
Oh, okay, maybe. Voice. Okay, maybe it was her then.
And you can tell it in that one scene about, are you going to take the baby now, Merlin? That one, it's so weird. She's young Morgana. Yeah.
And I don't think, well, this movie is not on the 1001 movies you must see before you die. And I disagree with that. I like this movie.
It's in my top 20 movies of all time.
Yeah, it's a good movie.
And last thing about cast, I did have in my notes that Nigel Terry was terrified and very nervous all through production, because he had to play Arthur at 3 different ages. And he had never done that before, even in a stage play, and found it really challenging to be able to play the teenager, the middle-aged hero, and then the older
one
Arthur
at the end.
But I think he did a good job. I think he does the second 2 very, very well. The teenager, it's good. It's not great. I would have done something with his hair a little bit different to help with that, but I don't think they had time with the shooting schedule they were doing, because we know they shoot stuff out of order. And I had read that too at one point, where like, who's in Garp that won the Oscar?
John Lithgow.
John Lithgow. And he talks about, I come in one day and I'm this age. I come in the next day and I'm this age. I come in the next day and I'm this age. Arthur, and Robin Williams said the same thing.
Yeah.
Trying to get those ages right is difficult in film. But I just think there's so much good about this movie. I can't say enough, from performance to music, like you said, to costuming, cinematography, makeup, everything. It's just so cool.
Yeah. Well, I was going to say, before we get the keys, did you have any trivia? I did find something that I forgot I had.
Yeah.
And that is, apparently Bryan Singer spent years in development hell trying to do a remake, and it was canceled finally. Huh. And Bryan Singer, of course, did Usual Suspects, which I mentioned earlier with Gabriel Byrne.
Yeah. Yeah.
And the only thing else I have, and we could have mentioned this in production, is that it is literally the same director and almost the entire same creative crew that did the movie Deliverance
Yep.
in 1972, I believe. So it would have been almost 10 years prior.
Yep.
He got all those people back together. So
And then
he works with Americans, obviously.
And doing stuff exterior.
Outside.
80% of that movie is exterior. So.
Yeah, it sure is. But yeah, as far as keys, well, I have Le Mort d'Arthur, the book by Thomas Mallory. Because without it, I don't think we would have had this movie. Do you want to keep going?
I had already mentioned Merlin, the TV series.
I forgot about that.
And I mentioned Camelot, the musical, based on the Camelot story that definitely plays up a lot more of the triad relationship of Arthur and Guinevere and Lancelot.
The betrayal, but they get over it. They all love each other so much.
Right. They have to, because they have to unite the kingdom. You have to deny your own self for the kingdom. But
he forgives them in the end, even though Guinevere's in a convent. I mean, all of that stuff's from the book. Whether knightly love and chivalry override with the sins of the physical bodies and that kind of thing.
It's played up well in this because even when Lancelot sees Arthur again a decade later, and he's an old hermit crazy man and he's still hurt, the wound is still there. Literally, the wound is still there. And he said, "'Tis my old wound." Which is
metaphorical as well. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. It's my guilt for what I did to you and to her and to the kingdom. Which is what elevates a story to myth is talking about, to me, is when it deals with base instincts and feelings and stuff that are very multi-generational. They're very
universal,
down, sort of thing. Yeah.
I've got that he, and this is not really a key, this would probably be more trivia, but that he used a lot of the same locations in Zardoz. I didn't even realize he directed Zardoz.
Yeah, we don't want to go there.
Well, that's on our list.
Yeah, well, that doesn't necessarily mean it's good. So was Fantastic
The Exorcist
Planet.
2, The Heretic, may be on our list as well, which is the movie Boorman did before this that totally tanked, and this was seen as a remake, or not a remake, as a comeback.
Comeback.
That's what I'm trying to say. Comeback, yeah.
Yeah, who would want to take on Exorcist 2? That would just be a daunting task anyway.
No shit. They couldn't even do it last year with that reboot.
Right. Or with a series or whatever.
Yeah.
But we'll see if Mike Flanagan can. But this also kicked off a slew of, I don't want to say sword and sandal because that's very
Italian.
That was the Italian 50s, right? Or 60s.
50s and 60s.
But medieval movies. So you had like Lady Hawk, Dark Crystal,
I love that movie, though.
Legend, Krull, Labyrinth. I mean, all these 80s fantasy, medievally sort of feel films. And this was kind of like the fourth.
What was the other one?
Lady Hawk, Legend, Krull.
Krull.
Remember Krull with the weird 5-star thing that he would fling at people?
We have talked about this movie before, but I cannot remember what it was in relation to.
Well, Sword and Sorcery. Do you remember that one?
I love that movie. The Sword and the Sorcerer. Yeah, I know what you're talking about.
Beastmaster. But even recently, Millie Bobby Brown did Damsel, which I still haven't seen, but it came and went really quickly. Yeah. But this was prior to Dragons, so before everybody got into Dragon Slayer and all the
Game of Thrones. Yeah,
the dragon movies. I think there was a big resurgence of medieval and knights and chivalry and all that because of this movie. I think that was
Would you consider Game of Thrones a key? Because I've never seen it. Okay.
Oh yeah, much more so into the political and familial, cultural kind of things. It's kind of like Game of Thrones is
more political.
Le Mort d'Arthur meets Lord of the Rings. Would be a good combo of that.
Okay.
It's just not finished. So don't start it unless you just want to be frustrated.
I want to talk about one of your favorite people.
Okay.
Zack Snyder.
Love
said
it.
that he said that this is his favorite movie,
Okay.
and he has named it as a big influence on Batman versus Superman: Dawn of Justice.
I don't. Okay.
It says to the point of making it the movie Bruce Wayne saw with his parents on the night of their death. I didn't remember that because I barely remember that movie anyway. He also cast Karen Hines as the main villain Steppenwolf in Snyder's Justice League.
Okay.
So Zack Snyder has ties to this film, or at least he says he does. He says it's his favorite.
Well, it's my favorite too, but I don't go on and make bad movies. So, you know.
Well, I mean, Zach's had one or two, but not many, that's for sure. Woo. But
and
I
it's
thought
really,
you get a kick out of that.
I think the keys that come out of this too are how to tell a mythological story and still keep it somewhat realistic, or at least believable in the realism. You can create any fantasy world you want as long as your characters believe in the fantasy and the fantasy stays true to itself.
Mm-hmm.
You can't have an Arthurian story and then introduce transporters like halfway through it. You know what I mean? You have to keep the integrity of your fantasy intact. Mm-hmm. And I think this movie does it probably the best of any movie of this ilk, of this medieval Arthurian fantasy. Because I have other ones on the list, like First Night. I mentioned that's Richard Gere and Sean Connery, and it's terrible.
There's also Timeline, that stupid one that Michael Crichton did. I forgot about that.
And there's the other one that I hate, A Knight's Tale. It even has Heath Ledger in it, and it's terrible, with Tangerine Dream doing all the music. And
I hate Tangerine Dream. That's a pet peeve of mine.
Yeah, and so it's not easy to do something this mythic and epic and huge and still work. I think Peter Jackson did do it in Lord of the Rings, the first trilogy. Not so much The Hobbit, but Lord of the Rings.
This is not necessarily a key, but George Lucas has basically cited that the King Arthur legend is basically what influenced Star Wars.
Of course.
So, yeah. But I mean,
again, just like we said at the end of last season with Dune, you've got the young kid who's got a destiny that he doesn't know. An old guy befriends him and starts mentoring him. The old guy ends up dying halfway through it, and he's got to take over the kingdom or the rebellion or the empire.
In all honesty, you should take John Boorman to this side and George Lucas to this side and just say Joseph Campbell right there in the center.
There you go.
Because it is the hero's journey, basically. They both were inspired from that type of concept.
Totally.
I have two others actually that I can't believe you haven't mentioned either one of them.
Do it.
Monty Python and the Holy Grail is one. That is a comedy that I can still endure. David and I had a conversation prior to our recording about how I don't like comedies anymore, but I do like Monty Python. And then the other one would be another one from my favorite genre directors, George Romero's Knight Riders, which was King Arthur on motorcycles.
Mm-hmm.
You remember that?
Oh yeah, loved it. But I knew you would bring it up, so I didn't say that one.
Don't they cast Tom Savini as Morgan, and he doesn't even realize that his character's based on a woman?
Right, he didn't when they were filming it. He just thought Morgan.
Okay, never mind. I was thinking that they actually played it up in the film. I couldn't remember. It's been so long since I've seen that movie.
Me too, but you may be right. You may be the fact that they keep.
I think that they tease him. They're like, you didn't realize your character's based on a woman.
I think you're right. Yeah,
but he is like the bad guy. And Ed
Harris.
Ed Harris, plays King Arthur.
Basically a motorcycle gang with chivalric tendencies.
Yeah, great movie. I need to watch that again.
I do too. Now I want to watch it. We should have it on the list.
That's what we should have done as a double feature with this.
That would have been fun. See, that would have been a better crossover. That would have been great.
But if that's all the keys you
Um,
have, we can move on to our second one.
Yes, our second one, just so staying structurally, is called The Green Knight. It came out in 21. It was written, produced, directed, and edited, like I said, by David Lowery. It's an adaptation of a poem which came out in the 14th century called Sir Gawain or Gawain and the Green Knight. Stars Dev Patel as Gawain and a journey. Basically, a very, very simple story set in medieval England at the time of King Arthur's reign. And on Christmas, in the poem, it's New Year's, but in this movie, it's Christmas. Christmas, literally a green knight, a knight who is green and looks like he's made out of wood and has a bow and a huge battle axe, enters the castle and comes up to the round table and challenges all of the knights if anyone will take him up on essentially a game. And the game is he'll let himself be beheaded by them if 1 year following this, the same knight comes and lets him return the favor at the Green.
Well, it's a strike.
Castle.
He doesn't necessarily say behead. That's just
Correct.
what happens.
Strike me. Yeah. And then he gets to strike him back. And the rest of the poem, the rest of the story, and the rest of this movie is Gawain volunteering to do that. He cuts the knight's head off. He picks the head up, puts it back. Holds it.
No, the knight picks his own head up.
Yeah. And gets back on the horse and says, basically, see you in a year. And as Gawain's popularity spreads and as he deals with having to face his own mortality because he knows that battle axe is pretty freaking big. And had you seen this movie before?
No, I had never seen this movie, but I really liked this movie. I thought that it would be beautiful to see on a big screen. The cinematography is amazing in it. I don't know anything about David Lowery except that he directed the live action version of Pete's Dragon.
Yeah.
So he likes.
Well, he also did another one that
Tales.
He also did another one I highly want to see, and I think you would too, called A Ghost Story.
Okay.
Which is another one he wrote and directed. Stars Casey Affleck and Rooney Mara. And it's about a man who becomes a ghost and remains in the house he shared with his wife. So it's like his dark version of Ghost. But after seeing this and seeing the cinematography in this, I could easily see where I would like to see that more by him, I guess would be a way to say it. I think his cinematography is brilliant.
It's a gorgeous film. I was going to say three things about this movie, A24. I'm like, do they make bad movies? I don't think they do. Because A24 produces some of the best new horror movies that we have out there, like Hereditary and The Witch and Midsommar. But now they're doing other movies besides genre movies, and this is obviously one of them. It's a fantasy movie, I guess you'd say.
It's my first note in my watch notes. It says A24. Okay, sit back and relax.
Yeah, I feel like I'm in good hands when I
know
watch
it's going to
one
be
of
a
their
good
movies.
Movie. Yeah. They are very, very good.
It is based on the poem Sir Gawain and the Green Knight, which I have read. I had to read it when I was in college, but I don't remember it very well because it was written in the 14th century.
Yeah, it's very Beowulfy. I always put it in the same group as Beowulf. It's one of these.
Right, exactly. But the tale, I'm pretty sure, is faithful to the poem. I think they probably they definitely take some liberties, which is exactly what I was talking about in the last film, that he took liberties with Mallory's book. This takes liberties with the poem. They actually refer to the king and queen, and it's King Arthur and Guinevere, and there is a round table, and that the king's sister is actually the mother of Gawain. He is not Morgan Le Fay. I mean, he is not Mordred. He is Gawain, but his mother was Morgan Le Fay. They just never say that. And I like that. I like seeing spins on that kind of stuff. It didn't bother me at all. And I love the cast. Thought the cast was great. We'll get to that in a second. Are there any scenes that you can remember or think of?
Not so much scenes, so much as there's so much
Beautiful imagery.
imagery in this movie, from especially the beginning and the whole ritual happening in one place while the knight is about to enter the court in the same sequence.
I think
There's a lot of tracking shots in this that you don't notice at all. Like when Gawain is on his adventure going, because a year passes and he has to go 6 days travel to the Green Knight's castle or the Green Knight's chapel in order to fulfill his obligation of allowing him to strike him. And along the way, it's all these perils all these adventures that he has. But one of them is meeting this little boy who's in a battlefield and talking to him and everything else. Well, all of that entire scene is one freaking shot that is going through a field while Gawain is on a horse talking to a little boy running beside him, and they're going back and forth and talking and everything. And that is all one freaking shot. I was going, this is amazingly good.
Yeah. Yeah. I was like, who is this guy? Because this film is beautiful. And
yes.
I mean, when it was over, Dennis had come in and sat down during the last 10 minutes. I said, you can come on in. It's almost over. And as soon as it was over, I was like, wow, that was something else. I just don't know how to describe it. It was just really, really good. And it got some notice, I'm sure, on the indie circuit, as well as maybe the festivals. We'll get to that later. Mm-hmm. As far as scenes, I mean, there are lots of things that play out as like parables or little morality tales within his journey to the Green Chapel. One of the ones that struck me was the woman that he meets in the dark that's asking him to find what she's missing, and it's in the water and it's her head.
Yeah, Winifred. Yeah.
And she's a ghost, and she's like, but she's missing her head and she's not at peace. And when he's there at first, it's just a normal house and he sleeps in the bed. Then he goes and listens to her and goes out and dives into the water, and it's really well filmed too. Finds a skull at the bottom of the water, comes up, returns it to her, and it turns out her skeleton, the house is all decrepit now. It's not new at all. It's all old. And there's a headless skeleton in the bed, and he returns the skull and that's the end of the story. It's like all these it's like Canterbury Tales in a way. That's a good key, actually.
That's a great key.
The little tales that he encounters on his way to the Green Chapel. And besides scenes, another thing I wanted to mention was that I love that when I read this, I, of course, picture a knight in a green armor. But what they play up in the movie is his connection to nature and everything that is green. And that's why he's made of wood and looks very botanical, for lack of a better word. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it does look very natural and wood. All of that is real with no CGI too. So that's all prosthetic makeup and lighting. Which I thought was really great and well done. And there's just a hint of green to him. So he's that dark woodland green. Right. He's not this glowy green look that you kind of get.
He's forest green.
He's forest. But
as far as other scenes, I mean, I like the fox that follows him. I think that's really cool. That's the only really CGI you notice in the movie that I can think of.
Talks.
Yeah, at one point it does. Yeah.
Well, and I don't think you can mention this movie and scenes without the scene with the lady in the manor and the erotic scene where he, we
ejaculates.
Get to see him. Yeah. I mean, she gives him happy ending there as long as he takes the sash.
She wants the sash, and he ends up ejaculating on it. You don't see it happen, but you see the evidence of it later.
Yeah. Yeah. And I did lose it there. Some of this is so visual, but allegorical that I miss it. Like I went back in production and found out that no, he originally did not want. He wanted the the Morgan Le Fay character or the Morgause character to be a different character, not his mother. But just in story and as they got into it, he just combined them together.
Right.
I just thought that was weird that she's the one that brings the Green Knight to begin with as a challenge. And then she's also the one that gives him the sash to protect him, because that's the MacGuffin at the very end. He has to give up his protection and totally sacrifice himself. That's his personal journey.
That's why the knight doesn't behead him, because he still has
Correct.
it on until the very end. Yeah.
Right. But so I don't know. So I thought that was just odd to be centering those at the beginning like that. But then suddenly the thief kid, who, God, he didn't get his comeuppance. And I'm a vengeance guy.
Yeah, he's an asshole.
I wanted him to die. But he takes the sash. And then the lady in the manor ends up with the sash and gives it to Gawain again.
Yeah.
And
it's very much like he's earning each thing back, because when he brings Winifred her head, she gives him his axe back because it gets stolen too.
Right.
And then at the end, he thinks he's outwitted or at least run away from the Green Knight. He gets his horse back.
Right.
And then he sees what his life would become because he didn't honor his end of the bargain. And it ends up the kingdom
which
goes
again
to
is
shit.
is a sequence done with totally no freaking dialogue, and it's
Right.
decades long.
Yeah.
And yet we're supposed to follow it. And I started in my notes going, what the hell is going on? And then like halfway through I figured it out, and then it kept going. I was going, okay, we got it. Okay, this is his last temptation of Christ moment. Okay.
It wasn't that long though, was it? It was only about 10 minutes.
It was an hour and a half.
Well, it feels long because of all those long tracking shots.
Well, no, it has just long holds. And Dev Patel is great in this. He is really, really good. But, well, the whole cast is good. But
yeah, I agree. The cast is great.
But again, that sequence was really unique, very artistic, very interesting. I don't know totally I think I'll want to watch the whole movie again and see if I like it or not.
I think it begs for multiple viewings, for sure.
And I wanted to ask, because you remember the poem, or you remember at least reading it. I'm not sure. I didn't do the research correctly, but from what I remember reading of the poem in college, the Lord of the Manor is the Green Knight. So that's why it's another temptation, because he plays he plays the game with him, going, I'm going to go out hunting and I'm going to bring back whatever I find, and I'm going to give to you as long as you'll give to me whatever you get here.
Right.
And that happens to be a kiss from my wife.
It ends up being a kiss. You think he's going to sleep with her, but instead it ends up being like a mutual masturbation kind of thing. She kind of jerks him off, basically, is what it happens. But but then the Lord, before he leaves, plants one on him. And I was like, this is wild. I did not expect that.
Yeah. And again, it's odd. It doesn't pay out, and it's not at the end. We don't find out. But like the fox is his friend, and he even feeds it, and they hang out until near the very end. The fox suddenly says, you're going to die, and blah, 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 and gets all mean. It's like, okay, he's the Green Knight too? I don't understand. So there were allegorical elements that I just didn't get, and maybe on a second viewing I would.
It's the thin line between allegorical and ambiguous.
Yeah.
And there is a lot of ambiguity in this, and the director admits it. I read that somewhere where he wanted some of that ambiguity.
Yeah, he wanted a lot of impressionistic sort of,
which is probably a good homage to the poem, because the poem is that way as well. It's going to be ambiguous and definitely allegorical. I found out I've got a production note that I forgot to mention earlier. This was originally set to debut at the 2020 South by Southwest Festival, but was canceled because of COVID.
Okay, makes sense.
This actually worked in his favor, because apparently he was not satisfied with the cut. And so it gave him time to refine things before it finally got released and went out.
Okay.
So that's another reason why the movie's probably so beautiful. But it does remind me of an A24 movie in its ambiguity because, I mean, there's some ambiguous moments in Midsommar and Hereditary too.
Yes. They're all
So,
very impressionistic in their
the
visual
Witch,
imagery.
even, yeah. But they're not directed by the same people.
Yeah, but
Even
if you
though
had
one of
not,
them is in here, one of the cast members is. But
if I had not gone into this knowing that it was Lowery, I would have asked within like the first 15 minutes if this was Rod Eggers.
Ari Aster.
This from
No, you're thinking of Ari Aster.
no, The Witch. In
Oh,
The
you're
Witch
thinking,
Eggers.
okay, I could see that.
This is very much The Witch. It's the lighting, the oppressiveness of it, the color palette. It's
Even the nature.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Nature
very much
becoming
so.
a prominent. This would make a great double feature with The Witch. I
It
think.
sure
It
would. You're right. It
Yeah.
would.
But yeah, that's what I have in one of my keys. Is I would have really sworn this was Eggers if I hadn't known it was someone else.
And then I've also got that it explicitly avoids being dated. That some of the technology is too advanced for the period in which the myths of King Arthur are typically set in 5th or 6th century. It appears
Yeah.
to be around 14th or 15th century, which is when those legends were written, not
And
when
when
they
the
would have
poem was
taken
written.
place.
The poem's 14th century. So yeah.
Right. Right.
Also, the use of the crown is the wrong period. The crown with the
It's the wrong continent.
seal. Yeah.
That
Yeah.
crown is
That's Islamic.
influenced from South American stuff.
Yeah.
It's not even English. Yeah, for sure. I've
Well,
got a
it was
picture of as
adopted, I
well.
think, it was adopted like the Byzantine time when they had those halos around Jesus all the time
Mhm.
and stuff. It's
Very
that kind of
iconic in
Yes.
an icon way, not
icon.
yeah,
Right.
exactly. I can talk cast if we're
Sure.
done with scenes. Anais Rizzo plays Helen. Which one was Helen? Can't remember who she was.
Helen's plays Helen?
Yeah.
I don't know Helen. No, I don't know a Helen in this. I don't think there's a Helen.
Oh,
in this.
she might be the queen. Maybe she's the queen. And Joe Anderson plays Paris. All right. First of all, I don't know why I have those in front of this. Dev Patel is clearly the lead. Dev Patel plays Gawain, and they do pronounce it Gawain. And when I studied in college, it was pronounced Gawain. But when I read it, I think in high school, it was Gawain.
Gawain.
Maybe it's a Tennessee thing. I don't know. David Lowery he had no intention of casting Dev Patel. It's usually obviously a white Anglo-Saxon person, but when he caught him modeling at a fashion spread, he was struck at how regal he looked and decided to cast him. And I can't think of anything I've seen him in other than Slumdog Millionaire. Do you know of anything?
No, I'm not.
I don't
I
either.
didn't see Skins or anything else. Dev Patel, no.
Okay. I mean, I saw Slumdog in the theater, but that's the only thing I know him from. Alicia Vikander. I know you know who she is.
Oh, yeah. Yeah,
She-
that's Ex Machina.
Yeah, she plays two parts in this. She plays Essel, his girlfriend, before he goes on his quest, but she also plays the lady that we mentioned takes his sash, the Lord's wife. As you said, she played Ava in Ex Machina. She's also in The Danish Girl, for which she received a supporting actor nod. I've not seen that. She is Swedish, and I found out she's also Michael Fassbender's wife.
Yep.
I didn't know
She's
that.
married to Fassbender. Yeah.
Yeah. Exactly.
And a cool trivia thing about her, she's the one that picked the short hair to distinguish the two characters, plus the fact that at the time, doing her research, she found out that at the time, prostitutes a lot of times had very short hair. First of all, for all the bugs and everything else, and also because if priests ever captured them and stuff and were punishing them, or for any punishment, they would shave their heads. So prostitutes a lot of times were either bald or had shaved heads, and they had to wear bells to distinguish them as lower in society.
I did read that about the bells for sure.
Yeah. So yeah, but she had bells.
Another familiar face in this, and she's been extremely familiar to me here lately, is Sarita Chowdhury, who plays Mother or Morgan.
Yeah.
We both know because we both just watched Fallout, and
Yep.
she's in that. She's one of the villains in that. But I have just
Maybe.
maybe, yeah. And then I just finished watching the last season of Jessica Jones. I was behind and I never finished it, and I watched it the other day. And she is Carrie Ann Moss's girlfriend, married girlfriend in that. She plays
Oh, okay.
Kith.
I didn't know that.
I didn't either. And I was like, how is this woman on my radar all of a sudden? Because I was watching Fallout, then I watched this, and I was watching Jessica Jones all at the same time. And she's in all three of them. But she's great. She's really, really good. And then I've got some other small parts that I don't know. However, I want to mention the king, King Arthur, in this is played by Sean Harris. Was he familiar to you?
Yeah. He looked awfully familiar to me, and I remember I looked him up then and found out that he was in Mission Impossible. He's been in like 2 of those, and he's in Prometheus. So,
okay. Well, he's also in something else. He is in a movie that I have told you about that I have added to our list called Possum, about a guy that carries a bag around with a puppet in it that's a giant spider with a clown head.
Screw that shit. No.
He is the lead in that. He and one other guy who's now dead, he's an old English actor, are the 2 leads in that film, and he carries that film. So I recognized him immediately, and I was like, this means we need to cover Possum. David has to watch that giant spider movie.
Well, he's great in this, and he's really, again, iconic. He's very memorable for his interpretation of Arthur in this. It's
They're very sickly looking.
Yes.
Both him and Guinevere do not look healthy at all.
No. And Guinevere is Kate Dickie, and she, I remember, is a similar character in Game of Thrones. She's one of the, since you don't know the show, she is one of the family's matriarchs, and she's very sickly all the way through it.
Well, she is one of 2. You mentioned Kate Dickie, who plays Queen. Guinevere. We know her as Guinevere. They call her the Queen. She is one of 2 people from The Witch. She played the mother in The Witch.
Oh, yeah. She was the mother. I hated her.
She was horrible.
Well, okay. Another thing, too, I just glanced at it in my watch notes, because the very first image in this movie is a wall with a little shed in front of it and a bunch of animals. And in the background,
something's on fire.
A building, but it's on fire.
Yeah.
And then you end up pulling through a lookout slot in the wall down to Gawain, who is asleep in the brothel, right? But before that, as all this is going and opening credits and all that, you're getting a goat and some chickens and everything else. And my first note is that Black Phillip? Is that fucking Black Phillip?
It's Black Phillip. It's Black Phillip. Oh my God. Yeah. The Witch is a good key to this. I'm going to put that down now that I think about it.
So visual.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Anyway, Kate Dickie played the Queen. She is a great British character actress. I think she may be Irish. I can't remember. And so we have her as the Queen. However, Ralph Ineson plays the Green Knight himself, as you said, with prosthetics, no CGI. And he is the father from The Witch. And most recently, he was in The First Omen. He played one of the priests in Rome.
Okay.
I like Ralph Ineson a lot. I like both of them. I think they're great. It's good that we're seeing more of them. The kid that is the scavenger that ends up ambushing Gawain and taking his stuff was played by Barry Keoghan, if I'm saying that right.
Sure.
Did you recognize him?
He looked familiar, but I didn't place him anywhere.
He's in Eternals. He plays Druig.
Oh, the one that
yeah, and we both really liked that movie. But he was a dick in that movie too.
Yeah.
He was the one that was rebelling against them, and they were trying to get him back. But I didn't know this, but apparently in this new version of the Batman with Robert Pattinson, he plays the Joker too.
Okay.
So, all right. Anyway,
dick in this, and he didn't get killed. So
There are more character actors in this movie. Winifred, the woman who lost her head, is played by Erin Kellyman. Do you remember her?
She's in Falcon and Winter Soldier.
She is. She played Carly, the leader of the Flag Smashers in Falcon and the Winter Soldier. She is very pretty. She's got freckles and like red, kinky, curly hair. And then one of my favorite character actors who just keeps rising up my list as far as favorite people is Joel Edgerton, who played the Lord. You mentioned him really recently in, I think, one of your genre weeks about Dark Matter. Or maybe it was a Coming to Get You. I can't remember. And then we'll be seeing him again because he's in another movie we're doing this season. So we'll be talking about him some more.
He got prominence too because he's Owen in the sequel series of Star Wars. He's Baru and Owen. He's the one that takes in Luke.
I'm not that familiar with those, so I couldn't tell you.
Yeah.
But I will say that the second movie we're going to do with him this season is also an A24 movie, though. So,
of course.
So A24 likes Joel Edgerton and other good actors. This movie was nominated for Best Fantasy Film by the Academy of Science Fiction, Fantasy, and Horror. The Saturn Awards are what those are. It lost to Everything Everywhere All at Once because they came out the same year. Both good movies. Many other wins and nominations on the indie circuit, and it is too new to even be considered for 1001 Movies You Must See Before You Die because they're only up to like 2019, I think, and this movie came out in 2021. So that's what I have for cast and awards.
Some trivia. I only have a few.
Okay.
Do you remember the Witches? I called it the Witches Tower in the notes and looked it up. It's the really crooked looking twisted tower that his mother goes up.
Yeah.
That is a real place. They didn't build that.
I know.
That's a real location. So,
I was like, what is it? I mean, is it really old or is it modern? It's just very weird looking.
Yeah, it is an old castle, and it's called the Wonderful Barn is the name of it, and it's in Ireland. And some other trivia. So I've got, Lowery has said that the illusion, the highway robbery is an allusion to Barry Lyndon from 1975. So that's a key and also like a trivia thing. He has also said that the theme of this is, I wrote it down here. Lowery describes the film as being about the importance of comporting oneself with integrity and goodness over being concerned with one's legacy. So that comes to fruition after the Green Knight has left, and it's going through all that stuff with people knowing Gawain and talking about his legend and talking about what happened and all that, and him like going, I'm not even a knight, don't call me sir, all that. So I thought that was really interesting. He said that's the thematic of it. And he has said that the complicated relationship between Morgan Le Fay and Gawain was evoked by Lowery's own experience with his mother and needing to be pushed to stand on his own as an adult. So I thought that was cool trivia.
Yeah, because he is, what would you call him? A sluggish like teenager to begin with. I mean, he's just
he cares about
drinking and whoring around.
Drinking and whoring, baby. That's all I need. So, yeah.
I have one bit of trivia that I'm going to have to read.
Sure.
Because it's long. The 5 traditional knightly virtues are friendship, generosity, chastity, courtesy, and piety. Throughout this movie, Gawain, when tested, fails at all 5. Friendship, after he befriends the fox, he ends up threatening it and chasing it away when the animal warns him about danger. Generosity, he gives a single coin to the scavenger and only after the latter explicitly begs for it. Chastity, he is seduced by the lady. Courtesy, he is initially asked for a reward from the ghost. Or no, he initially asks for a reward from the ghost of St. Winifred for helping her find her head. Piety, he does not want to attend the Christmas Mass at the beginning, and this shows he is not ready to be a knight yet, until his final choice at the Green Chapel. when he removes
Mhm.
the sash and lets the Green Knight behead him. And the only reason he does that is because he sees what his future's going to be, basically.
Yeah, but I think it's that because my first big key is Last Temptation of Christ. That happened in an instant while he was living his guilt of running away, of not meeting his responsibility. So it was very much the allegory of being afraid.
Okay. Well, that then brings us to keys. And we obviously don't need to repeat the keys we've already said for the first film, which most would apply to this, I would think. A lot of them anyway, as far as medieval knights and stuff. And you mentioned The Last Temptation of Christ. That's a good one.
But also Lowery has mentioned that his two big influences on this movie were Willow, the Lucasfilm one, and Excalibur. He said Excalibur was a big influence on doing this movie. I went, well, ironic that we put them together.
Yeah, and I liked that you mentioned The Witch. I think that's a great key. The only other one that I can think of, other than the poem itself, and I don't even think we know who the author of that is. I think it's anonymous. I think it's like Beowulf.
Agreed.
But the only other thing I can think of is what I mentioned earlier, the Canterbury Tales by Chaucer. It reminds me of that as well because of all the little allegorical
and Beowulf.
tales.
Beowulf's a good one too because Beowulf's an epic
right.
battle against a force that except he has to go fight it as opposed to it coming and challenging it.
Beowulf is specifically done in 3 acts, if I remember right, though, because it's like it's Beowulf, Grendel, and like the final one's a dragon, if I'm not mistaken. It's not Grendel at all. It's like a dragon, but there's like three sections of it.
Well, and I've got a visual key, which is that Green Knight riding out of Camelot and everything along the road with his head hanging is so Headless Horseman. I was going, oh my God, where's Ichabod? He's gonna see him. And my last key, I think you'll appreciate because you even mentioned it when he jumps in the water and he's trying to retrieve the head for Winifred because her husband beheaded her or whatever the reason.
Whoever did, somebody did,
very Ken Russell. And suddenly going to all those red lights behind him and then going to those really distant shots of him diving really deep and then suddenly cutting to like a close-up of a skull and a hand comes down on it. It's very Sphinx in the desert kind of thing.
I have a theory about that.
Yeah.
I think he used that red lighting to detract from the fact that it was done in a swimming pool.
Oh, could have. Could have
because it probably
Yeah.
looked fake. So he was like, okay, we need to change the lighting here to make it look less fake. Because, I mean, it looks like a murky, nasty, like pond out in the backyard of this house. Yeah. But when he dives in it, you don't see anything but water and red light and stuff. Yeah.
Yeah. Good one. Yeah. Good. Yeah. And the only other key I have even slightly mentioned is Seventh Seal. Just because it has that sort of
Bergman feel.
Gothic visual feel. Everything is an image, a picture, or whatever. Almost every scene,
art,
even down to when Essel is giving birth to his son during the guilt trip. She's lying there and looks at him, and he has that half shaft of light coming right down him. So half of his body's in total darkness, and then you can just see the other. It's like even the image you've got behind you. Same way. There's a lot of that whole sequence where everything is half and half.
Yeah.
And I thought, man, that is such good cinematography. That is just so well done. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a beautiful film. I have a feeling this guy's not going to have trouble getting a job.
No, not visually, I don't think. No, he needs to keep doing that.
Not at all. Well, that's going to do it for today. I do believe our second... I don't know. Would you say it's our second dip into the fantasy pool? Last year we started with Lord of the Rings. I don't think we did another one, did we?
Nope, I don't think
Anyway,
so.
the reason we're doing this is that we wanted to try to expand our genres a bit. So we're crossing from sci-fi into fantasy a bit, not much, maybe one or two a year. And then I'm going to try to start doing some more thriller or suspense as opposed to horror and on the same end. And we're going to have some of those coming up. We got some surprises coming up for you folks. And as always, David and I would like to thank you for joining us today on our little talk about Excalibur and the Green Knight. If you like what you hear, we would love for a review or a thumbs up or anything you can do to help us. If you want more, we have other shows on YouTube as well as some subscription and free content over on Patreon that you can also go check out. And I guess until next time, David, when we will be, where will we be? Well, I think we're still going to be in sci-fi, but it's horror too.
It's scary sci-fi. It's weird sci-fi. Anyway, we'll get there.
We'll get there. We'll see you next week.
See you next week.
All right. Bye.
Can't start the car. Johnny